Do you want to hit the open road but think, I have no money to do that? Well, then stick around because this video is for you. Hello all, welcome back to Rest Stop. I'm Vincent, and welcome to the first video in our series, the Top 10 Tightwad Travel Tips, how to travel on an extremely tight budget. So full disclosure, the first episode of Rest Stop was pretty scripted for the most part, so it went pretty smoothly. This one, not at all, so fair warning, ramblings ahead. And also, full disclosure, if you hear this annoying squalling in the background, you probably heard it in the last video too, one of my cats is in heat and will not shut up, so probably going to have to deal with that for a few videos too. And before we get started, I do want to mention, while these are some tips that I do encourage, this video is completely for entertainment purposes only. Don't take my advice and get yourself into some trouble out there. These are just some tips. Again, it's for entertainment only. But, if you want to utilize some of these, do it at your own discretion. They helped me. I'm not going to promise that they're going to help you in the same way. So a little background here. This entire series really all stemmed from one question. I've had a lot of my friends ask me over the years how I can afford to take all of these trips and see all these places, because I've got no money, and a lot of those friends have more money than I do, and they say they can't afford to take these trips. They don't see how I can. Another full disclosure here, I don't make money off these YouTube videos, so all these trips are out of pocket. But I've been doing this long before I've had the YouTube channel. I've been taking these trips since I was in college, and I definitely didn't have any money then. But I would still find a way to just scrape up enough to be able to take a little trip somewhere. And these are all tips on taking road trips. Again, as I stated in the first video, that's what we do here. I'm not talking about taking anything by, plane, train, bus, none of that. This is all just being on the road. Now, I might make a later video about a bus trip I took in the past and how I done that on a pretty tight budget as well. But for now, we're just going to get into how you can take a 1, 2, maybe 3-day road trip on a very tight budget. Now, we're not really going to get into much detail with these points today. Those will come in, additional videos will break down each individual tip. Today, we're just going to kind of skim over and give a brief summary to each of these tips. So without further ado, here are my top 10 tightwad travel tips. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. Hi. Alright, so number 10. Now, this one is going to be pretty controversial, as a few of these are, but I feel like this one will be the most. Number 10, bring some type of protection. Now, you may say, well, that really doesn't help me any. What does that have to do with traveling on a budget? Well, no, it really doesn't. But as you're going to see with some of these later tips, I highly recommend just carry some type of protection. I have my concealed carry. If you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine. But, bring something. Have pepper spray, a pocket knife, your keys through your hand, whatever. And again, this is for entertainment only, so don't just take my advice. I'm not giving you any legal advice here. I'm just saying, when you're on the road, I don't care if you're a man or woman, but especially, young women on the road, there are dangerous things that happen out there. Don't let yourself become a victim. Always have something to fight back with. So that's all I'll really say on that for now. Number 9, travel with a friend. This is another big one here. You really don't want to do this alone. Now, I have done it alone a lot in the past, and sometimes I do recommend it. It is nice to just get out and enjoy the open road alone. But traveling with a friend will really help you when it comes to traveling on a budget. Because for one, that's someone to split the bill with. In my non-solo travels, we've always split everything right down the middle, and that comes to, gas, lodging situation, anything like that. Food is kind of, to each their own, but it will really help bring down that cost of the total trip when you have someone to split it with. And I say travel with a friend, and I mean that. Maybe two friends tops, but really, no. I don't recommend traveling with more than one other person because, for the most part, two people can agree on something. You can find some common ground of, where you want to eat at, where you'd like to go, where you want to stay. When there's more than two people, it really complicates things. Lots of times, two of them will kind of stick together, the other one's third wheel. And it just really doesn't work out that way. Yeah, it can bring down the cost a little bit more, but not really a whole lot extra. Plus, there are some other things later in this video I'll discuss that bringing a third person will really kind of put a damper on. Number 8, pack light. Funny little story, I can get into this more in a later video, but on one of my trips a few years ago with my friend Claude, I had a small car, so I said, just whatever you do, pack light. I had everything shoved down into one little suitcase, and that was everything I needed for those couple days. Well, Claude shows up with a giant duffel bag, and had to cram that in the trunk with everything else we were bringing. Because something you'll find out on these little 1 to 2 day trips, lots of times you end up packing more for that than you will on maybe a 4 or 5 day trip. I don't really know why it works out that way, but it tends to do so. So just pack light because you're going to need as much room in the car as you can, as I'll get into here shortly. But also, the less weight on the car, the better, and the less you have to carry around. That's really going to help you in the long run. Number 7. Now, here's one a lot of you aren't going to like, but drive at night. Now, I'm not saying drive all night until you get tired and you're wanting to fall asleep at the wheel. Again, do this at your own discretion. If you're not comfortable driving at night, then don't do it. But I highly suggest it if you are, because for one, you're going to use a lot less gas, especially if you're driving in the summertime. You can put the window down. You're not going to need the air conditioner really, if at all. So, you've got that cool night air, and there's a lot less traffic on the road. It's a lot less stop and go. So once again, you're using less gas. And another great thing about driving at night is, you can drive on through the night and maybe, stop once it gets a little light out just to rest for a little bit, maybe take a little nap in your car for an hour or two, and then you've got the whole day ahead of you. Again, I don't suggest this if you just cannot stay awake at night, and I'll be honest, I really can't anymore either. I used to make all my trips all through the night, but now I've gotten to the point where I'll just go to bed really early the day before and get up at about 2 in the morning and leave shortly thereafter. So I'm still driving through the darkness for a long time, still a lot less traffic on the road, but I'll usually get to where I'm going as soon as the sun comes up, and once again, I've got the whole day ahead of me. Number 6. This is one that I recommend to everyone, and I think you'll all love. Snacks. Bring lots and lots of snacks. I've seen the post go around on Facebook before a few times, and I completely agree with it. When you're preparing for a road trip, it should look like you gave a 6-year-old kid a $100 bill, sent him down the snack aisle in Walmart, and told him go crazy. Bring as many snacks as you like, as many as you can afford, and stock up on them for a few weeks, of course, so it's not all at once. But how bringing all these snacks can actually save you money, well, naturally, the more you eat in the car, the less hungry you're going to be when you actually go out to eat somewhere at a restaurant, and the less money you're going to spend there. Yeah, you might be on a diet, but it's a trip. Have fun. Go ahead and fill yourself up with all the junk food you want, all the candy, pretzels, chips, whatever you want to have in the car with you, whatever you can bring. Just fill up on that, and that's a lot less money you're going to spend when you do go to a restaurant. But more on that in a minute. Number 5. the one that nobody ever wants to do or really ever thinks of until it's too late. Service your car. Now, do whatever you can afford, but even if that just means, get your oil changed and all your fluids checked, do that. Before I take a road trip, I'll usually run a bottle of gas treatment through the car, or twice a year I might put a can of Seafoam in there. The smoother your car is running, the better gas mileage you're going to get, which obviously is going to save you some money. And you really don't want your car breaking down in the middle of your road trip, because then you're really going to run into some financial problems. Number 4, save money. It's really that simple. Save money and cashback apps. Now, I'm not saying you have to save a whole lot of money. It's obvious you want to take one of these trips, you should be putting back something. But if you just put back $5 a week, in 6 months' time, that's over $125 you'll have saved. And that can really go a long way. And as for cashback apps, use whatever you want. This video is not sponsored, obviously, by any of these, but 2 of my favorites are Ibotta and Get Upside. Get Upside is more so for gas, but you can use it at restaurants. And after time, especially when you're using it at the restaurants, it will add up. It might only be a few cents at a time every time you fill up, but you can get usually up to $10 back at whatever restaurants they'll use. And that will really add up over time. We'll cash it out about every 6 months or so, and usually brings in about $50 to $80, somewhere in there. And as for Ibotta, we use it every time we get groceries. That one really adds up. We've had well over $150 before, just over a 6-month period saved up on there. And there's a few more out there that my wife will use, and usually they're good for a restaurant gift card or something. But we have saved so much money on cashback apps before that we've only paid maybe about $50 out of pocket for a trip. But it really all comes down to how much you can afford to put back. And, if you want to take these trips, just go ahead and, set a little cash aside a week. Don't go out to eat once a week or so. Pack you a sandwich for lunch that day, whatever it takes to save a few extra dollars, because it really all adds up. And I know sometimes things come about and, you have to break into that nest egg. But as I've said a lot, your bills are pretty much always going to be there. Our time on Earth is limited. So if you come into a little extra cash, I'm not saying blow everything you have, especially if you have a lot of bills to pay. Yeah, that comes first. But take the time to enjoy the little things here and there. And especially if you want to get out and enjoy the road, definitely take the time to do that. Now, number 3 kind of ties into number 4, but also back into number 6. And it is eat cheap. I understand you go somewhere new, you want to eat somewhere special, somewhere different, and that's the way I always am too. When me and my wife take a trip, we always make a point to at least eat at 1 or 2 different places that we're not going to get the chance to eat at home. But you really start to run into some extra money then. So it all comes to how much money are you willing to spend, or how much can you spend on this trip. If it's not a lot, well, then I suggest going to McDonald's a few times, any fast food, or if you have a Sheetz or anything of the like in your area, that comes in handy too. Them 2 hot dogs for $1, that's pretty good eating when you don't have much money. And along with that, save up gift cards. If there's people who don't know what to get you for Christmas or birthday, just ask for restaurant gift cards. We've got to a point that certain people give them to us for our anniversary or for Christmas, whatever. And we'll usually save up about a good almost $100 worth in restaurant gift cards over the course of a year. And that can knock out a good chunk of expenses on your trip. Because when it comes down to it, food and gas are really your 2 most important factors on this trip. You got to have the gas to get wherever and get back, and you have to eat. So that's really where you need to focus your money on, and save as much money as you can along the way, of course. And that leads directly into number 2. Now, this one should be a no-brainer, but a lot of people seem to overlook this. Budget everything. And I do mean everything. If you want to see some attraction where you're at, add that in. You want to go out to a nice restaurant, look at their menu online beforehand, think of what you might like to get, or at least get a general idea of their prices, and include the tip in there as well. Every dime that you know you are going to spend, budget it in your trip. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you have to budget your souvenirs and whatnot. That can come out of extra pocket money you might have on you. But everything that you know you're going to spend, you need to have set aside a budget for, and you need to keep that money safe. And I also suggest round up. If you're looking at a menu online and it looks like your total bill is going to be somewhere around $26, round it up to $30. You'd much rather have some extra cash in your pocket at the end of your trip than not have enough to get you back home. Now again, in the further videos, when I break down these tips even more, I'm probably going to spend the most time on number 2, because I can show you how I break down each individual day, our food, our activities, our lodging, everything. And that way, we always know pretty much exactly what we're going to have to spend on an upcoming trip. I've been doing this since I started taking these road trips, and it's always helped me. And that brings us to number 1, quite possibly the most controversial one on this list, and that is lodging. I know when you take a trip, you want to go somewhere nice. You really want to stay in some nice fancy hotel, somewhere with all these extra amenities. But really, do you need that? Because think, you're taking these road trips, if you have a certain destination in mind, how much time do you really want to spend in your room? Don't you want to get out and explore the town? Because, who knows when you're going to get back there again. I'm going to tell you honestly, as someone who works in a hotel, most of them are the same. Yeah, I work in a resort, and I'll go to resorts sometimes for that experience, but really the things you want to see aren't at the hotel or motel. I'm not saying that you want to pick the cheapest room out there, because there's probably a reason it's the cheapest room. One of my favorite travel YouTubers, Dan Bell, has an entire series where he goes around to dirty motels and, shows all the disgusting things in there. So if you're going to stay in a room, you might want to spend a little extra money. But that's where it comes into the controversial part of how much you really want to spend on this trip, and especially on your lodging. I don't suggest this. So again, take all that I'm saying with a grain of salt. All I am saying, though, is I have taken many trips where I just slept in my car, which is the very reason I've said to pack light, carry protection, have a friend with you, drop the seats back, bring a pillow along, and go to sleep. Make sure your doors are locked, and go somewhere in a nice public area. Now, granted, at the time when I was doing that, sleeping in my car, that's when Walmarts were still open 24 hours. I can't tell you how many Walmart parking lots I've slept in, but I'd always go right near the door, so, it was a nice lit public place. There were still people around, even all hours of the night, so I never really felt in any danger. But again, I'm not suggesting you do that, because especially if you're a young lady, as I said earlier, there are a lot of dangers out there. Trafficking is a very serious thing, we all know. And, you don't want to get yourself into any situation. But I'm just saying there are alternatives to those expensive hotel rooms. Now, something else Claude and I used to do, when we go to the beach, there was a campground down there. $20 a night to camp there. That beat any motel on the beach. Now, granted, we had to be back there by a certain time because they'd locked the gates up. But just being able to camp out there, that added to the experience all the more. We'd bring the tent, just throw the tent up. We had a little disposable grill that we'd cook on, just sit out around a fire all night, then finally go to sleep, wake up the next morning, start new. So again, just look into your options. If you feel pretty comfortable sleeping in your car, there's thousands of people that do it. A lot of people make lifestyles out of this. It's not the worst thing in the world. Again, be safe with all of this. Don't just watch this video and take all of my words as gospel. Obviously, times have changed over the last few years. When I was doing this, things were a little bit different. And that goes for this whole list because, the economy is still not so great. It wasn't then either, but, inflation is up. So you can't exactly take a trip for as cheap as I was about 10 years ago. But the principles of it are still there. You can pretty much take all of this the same way. But again, when it comes down to every one of these points, the main factor here is be safe. If you're out there, especially if you're solo traveling, I've done it many times, and while I've never really felt in any danger, I'm sure there were a few situations I got myself into that probably could have been dangerous, and I probably shouldn't have done those things. And on top of all of this, if you have extra money to spend, you don't have to worry about really traveling on a tight budget. But these are for all the people like me. I'm 30 years old now. I've been doing this since I was 18, and I've been, pretty broke all of my life. But I still like to take the time to get out and explore. And that's what I really want to encourage on this channel, and especially with this series, as I said in the first video. If I can set that spark of inspiration, from On the Road with Vincent or Next Exit that makes you think, oh, I'd really like to see these locations, well, let this series be that final driving force to really let you get out there and explore all these things you want to see. And if there's any other questions that you have, that could help you finally get out there, let me know in the comments. I'll be glad to make a future video addressing all of these things. And again, there will be 10 more videos following this one, just on this series alone of the top 10 tightwad travel tips. I'm going to break down each one of these points mentioned here today in full detail. So definitely stay tuned for all of those to come. But that's about all for the top 10 tightwad travel tips for today. So as we done in the last video, we're going to continue our tradition of adding a new patch to the Been There Done That tapestry. So just going to grab one here beside me at random, and we have Natural Bridge State Park in Virginia. So my wife and I went here on our anniversary last year, and I've lived in Virginia my entire life, and I'd wanted to go here since I was a kid because my granny and papa went when I was really little, and they showed me pictures of it, and I thought it was beautiful back then. And growing up all through school and whatnot, seeing all the pictures of it, I still thought it was so beautiful, but it was nothing compared to when I finally got there. I thought this thing was maybe 100 feet high or so, didn't really know what to expect. But as I said in the video when we went there, this thing's about the size of Niagara Falls. It is absolutely huge. And it is, I hate to use the cliche of breathtaking, but it really is. Words cannot describe this place, pictures cannot, and the video definitely cannot as well. So if you are in the area of Natural Bridge, Virginia, I highly recommend stopping there. So again, that'll about do it for this episode of Rest Stop. Now, if you have any tips you'd like to add for traveling on a budget, definitely leave them in the comments. I'm sure there's quite a few I've left out, and there's probably a few points I forgot to make, but hopefully I'll remember those when it comes time to film the rest of this series and break down each one of these points individually. And again, this is for entertainment only. Don't go out there and get yourself hurt because you listen to me. These are just some things that I've used in the past, and it's worked for me. It might not work for you. All results may vary. But again, thank you for joining me. If you like this video and want to see what's to come, then definitely like this video and please subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video in the future. Again, I am Vincent Rains, wishing you safe travels, and I'll catch up with you at the next rest stop.